Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, November 18th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. We'd like to welcome all those in the audience joining us this evening. I'd also like to make a note that board member Melissa Gleason is joining us by phone, so just so the board is aware of that. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Does the board have any conflicts of interest to declare? Any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? Moving on, school board norms. Aaron, would you read the board norms, please?
The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Aaron. We have no public communication. Under the consent agenda, would any board member like anything removed from the consent agenda or clarified? Anything removed? If not, is there a motion? Motion by Steve, second by Dan. We have a motion, a second for approval of the consent agenda. Any discussion? Any discussion? Assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving into our regular meeting, we don't have recognition tonight or correspondence. Under reports, we have the Finance Committee met. Dan, would you give a report of that, please?
So you can read on the consent agenda, we did have the minutes from the last meeting, but I want to bring to light kind of some context about what we're discussing right now. One of the key budget areas and operational issues that we're having with the district is the transportation. If you recall, the costs went up significantly last year. In addition, we're having problems with availability, and with those two issues, we're looking at what would it take to perhaps maybe bring that back into district control. So right now the focus is on activities busing. That's the area that will give us some potential cost savings without overwhelming us operationally, and perhaps give us some flexibility for scheduling and making sure we have buses available when they're needed. So right now, that's the plan, is to take a look at what that would cost. Christy's going to be sending out some bids for that, and again, the hope is to see some real cost savings, but again, and also improving our availability of transportation. So, any questions or other comments?
Any questions from the board? We're kind of in an exploratory phase of this, but just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. Anything to add, Aaron, to that?
Yeah, and we covered the issues with like maintenance and how we would handle that, and drivers and licensing and all that. And there are some I don't want to say issues, but things that we need to be aware of as we go through this. It's not just simply buying a bus and then driving it around. There are other things that we need to consider, and we're looking at all that stuff. So it's a comprehensive look at what it's going to take to try to address the costs and the availability.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other questions from the board? Okay, if not, moving on to our agenda, we have Strategic Focus 2, Leadership for Learning Goal number 3. Dr.
Thank you. You have the presentation there in front of you, and I think it's also projected behind me here. Leadership for Learning is defined here, and this is the goal that we have. One of the things that I'm adding, because I have appreciated the feedback I've received from the board and the progress monitoring, and it was recommended to include an executive summary, kind of an overarching, this is what we're looking at. So I'll touch on some of these areas in greater detail, but currently when you look at the leadership opportunities, and again, this is annually inventory the leadership and mentor opportunities for staff, and then provide improvement strategies. That's our goal. So from a current status, when you look at, we have a lot of opportunities for staff. That's one of the things that really came through to me, that we have a lot of different opportunities, although they are there are more options in some than others. and that's part of what we're looking at. And when we inventory, it gives us a sense of where things are. But there's, they are categorized into 6 kind of broad key areas, either in advisories at the building level, district level, community or state level, professional sharing, advancement, and then student service advisories. And then we also provide mentoring. That happens at the local level, and that happens at the state level, and we've been doing that for a number of years. And then we have looked at onboarding and enhanced onboarding in 24-25, and 24 new staff are participating in that, and I'll touch on onboarding just a little bit more. So at a broad level, our improvement recommendations, we actually have 3. One is committee charters. We've talked about those in the past. I'll give, I have an example that you can look at for what those are, and I'll talk about them more. The Teacher Leadership Academy, we've had 2 cohorts already. You've heard a lot about the TLA, a recommendation to continue and to add another cohort to begin in June of 2025. The third one is something we'll have to spend a little bit more time on to share with you, and this is not ready for prime time. I'm just bringing it up for awareness. There'll be future board discussions on this, but it has to go through our PD committee. But a way to provide professional learning. It's one of the things that we've heard from our staff in multiple different opportunities to get feedback. We've heard that our staff needs more flexible, more relevant professional learning. So we have a recommendation on how we can do that. So the impact of those things, of course, would boost morale and provide greater opportunities for professional growth. It would strengthen culture, further develop our teacher leaders, and then support innovative professional learning that meets unique individual needs of our staff, and then honor the time and the work that they're doing outside of the contracted day. So again, this is the current status. I'm not going to go through each of these slides, just an overarching. We have 6 key areas. I talked about those. These are the examples of what we inventoried in building advisory, community advisory, state advisory, district advisory, student services advisories, sharing expertise, and then opportunities for professional advancement. That is what we categorized as leadership in our leadership inventory. And I'm sure I missed some, so if anybody has any that they want to add to that list, I'd be happy to add some, because I'm sure we did miss. The mentoring opportunities, so all of our new teachers go through an onboarding process. We revised that fairly significantly to maximize the amount of time that our new staff get with their mentors. So rather than doing a lot of busy work and paperwork, we've offloaded that to doing it online, as opposed to then maximizing the time we get with those individuals more for mentoring opportunities. We do local mentoring, so 100% of, so we have 24 new staff. They get to spend time with their mentors. Local mentoring, every new teacher, whether they are new to the profession or new to the district, get mentoring opportunities. 100% of our first-year teachers, so those that are new to the profession, get state mentoring. And then they get that for 1 year or 2 years, depending on if they're what they want. We ask that they go to, so 100% go to first-year mentoring, and then they have that option to go to the second year of mentoring as well. That's through ND Rise. Our new administrators, they have the same opportunity. Those that are new to the profession go through the NDCEL mentoring training. Those that are not new to the profession have the option to. They may if they choose to, they may not. And then they have an option to continue on after that initial year if they feel like that's necessary, if they've seen value in that and they want to continue. So the improvement strategies, as I talked about before, fall into community charters for district committees, the TLA, and then for flexible learning. Committee charters came through a few different ways for feedback, specifically the Vital Network analysis that we looked at, and really the purpose of those committee charters. One of the things that we found when we looked at the data from Vital, a lot of questions around the selection. So how are people selected to serve on different committees? Why are these individuals selected? So we also shifted to an application process, so it isn't a selection necessarily. Everybody has a chance to apply. And we are going to be including these charters so people can look at, well, what's the time commitment? Because that's oftentimes something that may encourage or discourage somebody from participating in a district committee. Is what's my time commitment? What's the role of what's the specific role of this committee? If I make a commitment of my time, what am I going to be working on, and what am I going to be doing? Another component of that is what's our decision-making authority? Are we an advisory? Are we simply sharing feedback, or do we have discretion in this committee? So we felt like providing charters would help to encourage that application process and make sure that our teachers feel like they have the necessary information to decide if this is something that they want to pursue as a leadership opportunity. And then, of course, the TLA. We're looking to begin that in June of 2025, and I'll start doing in the winter some introductory orientation types of meetings to recruit folks to join us for the next iteration of the TLA. So that would run 5 semesters through December 26. I gave you an example of a committee charter. We have completed that one, and we anticipate completing the rest of them by January 2025. The TLA, right now, I think it's a perfect time. In the past, we've had an opportunity to be a regional partner, so we offer that for our staff, and then open up a few slots to school districts within our region that may not be able to do something like this on their own. We've talked before about wanting to make sure that as a regional hub school that we provide those opportunities for our neighboring partners that can't do that yet. But when you look at, we have 50% of our existing staff have a master's degree, so that means that 50% don't yet have that graduate degree. That was at its high, I believe, in our district, was around 65% if you look back the last 10 years. Just a lot of changeover in staff, retirements, and those things. And so I think this might be a pretty good opportunity for us to house this simply as JPS staff and not as a regional partner. But we'll see what happens. And the Burgum Foundation has again agreed to provide the cost for half the tuition. UJ continues to be a great partner. They don't charge fees. So that becomes a very, very reasonable graduate degree for 30 credits at about $185 a credit hour. Becomes a very, very affordable for our staff. So I'm looking forward to continuing that. And to be honest, the TLA is the best professional development for me that I think I've ever had. I have a chance to visit with our staff, teach our staff in different areas, learn from them and their perspectives. I think it's a great opportunity, not just for our staff, but it is for me too. The next one might take a little bit more discussion, but as I said at the outset, you know, the feedback we've gotten over with PD is a desire for it to be more relevant to individual staff and not just this is what we're going to do PD, and then everybody fits into that same box. And then we've also had discussions at a lot of different areas around how we compensate for that time when it happens outside of the contracted day. So if we offer something in the summer, you know, how is that compensated for that time because it's not during contract time? And so when you look at the desire to be as flexible as possible, and another thing that we've heard too from staff is our calendar is pretty jam-packed, especially towards the beginning of the year. And so we hit our teacher in-service days and it's boom, 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 heavy, heavy, heavy. You know, they're jam-packed from 8 to 5 with stuff, or 8 to 4 with stuff. And the desire is, you know, can we have a little bit more time between in-service and the PD responsibilities and getting our stuff ready because we have kids showing up on Thursday. And so if we go heavy, heavy, heavy all the way till Wednesday at 4 o'clock, that next day feels pretty rushed for our teachers. And so we're hearing that too. And so in a nutshell, what we're looking at, and this is something that has to go through our professional development committee, we want to get a formal presentation, a formal proposal that would be considered by the board, and really want to work out all of the kinks and context to this. But really what we would want to do is allow for two of our professional development days to be a little bit more flexible. So for example, between July 1st and August 15th, if we offer professional development opportunities that might typically happen during our in-service days, can we give people credit for doing that work during their non-contracted time? So when that Wednesday before school starts, if people have met those criteria, those hours, they've met that hour requirement outside of their contracted time, they wouldn't have to be there for that contracted day. They've already fulfilled their expectations and contractual obligations because they did stuff at a different time. So that would be one avenue that we could do that. We've also talked about transitioning to the focus model of Marzano. And in the, let's see, what is it, the fourth bullet down, talks about how if we make that transition and help our staff in adopting that focus model framework, goal setting in August, knowledge and skill building in September, strategy practice in October, a coaching cycle in November and December. If they do that during that time period, we would treat January's professional development day in the same manner. So if they fulfilled those requirements outside of their contracted time, whether that's in the summer, whether that's in throughout the school year, as I've kind of outlined in the fourth bullet, the staff would then not need to be there for that professional development in January. If they opted not to do that, then they would still need to be there to fulfill those contractual obligations. But it's a way that we're trying to honor the staff for what they're doing and how we can meld the work that is relevant to people into our schedule. So again, this is something that needs a lot more discussion at a professional development committee level. But we look forward to presenting that in the spring of 2025 as what I think is going to be a very important discussion on how we can provide flexible professional learning. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
On slide 6, community advisory opportunities. I've been attending a few meetings of the Stutsman County Hunger Coalition. I think staff in the district, a good number of staff have been receiving those emails also. So if we could add that
Sure.
To there, and I plan to reach out to a few people specifically to see their interest level in joining me on that, representing the district.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, if not, under board education, we have strategic competency, standards-based learning overview. Adam Gaylor, please. Yes, thank you. So we've finished the strategic focus 2 leadership for learning goal 3. Since that's part of our progress monitoring, is there a motion for approval of that report? Motion by Aaron, second by Jason. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to strategic competency, standards-based learning overview. Thank you. I always forget that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Leck, for inviting me to talk about this tonight. It reminds me of, I think it was October of 2017. We had just completed our accreditation. We got our accreditation report. So it's been that long since that report. In that report, one of the findings and opportunities for growth that they identified was for our district to have consistent grading practices that implemented standards. And so since that time at 2017, and even I think before that in this district, there's been a strength of teacher leadership in knowing our standards and educating students around our standards and working to make sure that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, meaning that each student that comes to us, no matter whether which teacher they have or which classroom they're in, that we have a set of guaranteed things that they'll walk away from that, and that they'll be ready for the next level, and they'll be ready for their next step in life because of that. So we have a lot of hardworking teachers that have been working on this for a long time. I'm going to kind of dive back and forth between a little bit of having a little bit of fun with maybe how we've thought about grading in the past, and that's not to say at all that what we've done is bad in any way, but it's that we can get better. A lot of times, and Mr. Mickelson's probably heard this before, because I would say this at the high school all the time, we don't have to be sick to get better. And I truly believe that I think that this is a better way to clearly communicate with our learners, and it's a better way for our students to be able to have some agency and ownership in their learning. And so I think that standards-based learning is a lot of things in our district. It's a district-wide initiative, and it's not something that just happened this year. It's something that's been going on since 2017 and even prior with work that's happened in this district. So how can we get clearer? So I want to give you a couple examples here. So you go to the doctor with a sore throat. The doctor said she totaled up all your symptoms, and you have 112 out of 150 points. This averages to a 75%. Thank you, and see you later. So what does that tell you about what your symptoms are, how severe they are or aren't? It's oversimplifying maybe some grading practices, but we're all familiar with, you kind of have a seat of your pants feeling, oh, 75%, that must be about a C, but it still doesn't give you anything actionable that you could do with that information. You go to your mechanic, they say you've got problems with your brakes and your tires, but the drivetrain is solid. Overall, I averaged some scores from your brakes and your tires and your drivetrain, and you've got a 58% good luck on your road trip. Or your boss gives you a 71% on your evaluation and says you need to improve. What specifically do you improve? Now, I have no doubt that our teachers know exactly what the steps are that our students need to improve, but I don't think that our traditional grading system always clearly articulates to the students and the parents what it is that they need to do to improve. So I think that we would feel better, and we do feel better as professionals and experts when we give advice that gives feedback and solutions. At a board member's request, I also looked at another professional organization that really could use some help. And so tonight we're going to take a quick trip and do some evaluation of the Dallas Cowboys, of quarterback performance. We're going to evaluate a rookie player and some team goals. Now, I had some help with some of these analogies, so I'm going to stumble through them. This first one, we're looking at quarterback performance. So in traditional grading, all Dak Prescott, who's apparently is injured, probably not playing tonight, apparently, if his performance is graded at a 75% after averaging all the categories that go into quarterback performance, it would leave him guessing, or leave the team guessing, what does he need to work on? In a standards-based learning set of feedback, there might be some categories like passing accuracy, pocket awareness, third down conversions, and he would also get a rating in that, and then there would be a corresponding set, like a continuum, that he gets that more detailed feedback. So if his passing accuracy is at proficient, or a 3, he shows reliable accuracy in most game situations, completing a high percentage of passes to open targets. Versus pocket awareness that's developing is he occasionally misjudges pressure, leading to sacks or hurried throws. So you can see we're getting to more detailed levels of feedback. If you're looking at a rookie player, Deuce Vaughn, he gets a 68% in traditional grading for his first season. This is based on a mix of things: rushing yards, blocking, special teams play. When we know that, in fact, he's beginning at rushing, his blocking might be limited by his size and That's not necessarily a strength for him, but returns are a strength. So now that the team knows what his strengths are, they can create a special training plan that builds on that strength while addressing some of his areas where he needs some more help. When we're looking at team goals for the Cowboys, I believe their record is 3-6, which isn't a great record. Now they're headed into a tough matchup tonight, but if their overall success was judged only by that final record or that final, at the end of the season, how many wins and losses, we wouldn't know exactly how they performed or where they specifically needed to improve. But if you break it down into red zone efficiency, turnover differential, penalty reduction, now we have more specific, more actionable feedback. So that's just a quick analogy, and we could come up with a lot of different analogies for how to compare more specific, more clear feedback. But I want to take you guys first on a camping trip. So any of us could be going camping. We'll pick a hypothetical person. So Owen is going camping. Now, Owen needs a few things in this camping trip. He needs to be able to identify what are threats and also opportunities. You know, what water is safe to drink? Are there bears there? Are there not? He needs to have a few skills for this camping trip: building a fire, packing a canoe, navigating on a map, setting up a tent. And then he has to have some higher level skills like reasoning. How do I make decisions in an emergency situation? You have to have that foundational knowledge and some of those skills to be able to make good decisions. So in a traditional model, in some cases, Owen might take an assessment in understanding threats and opportunities. So he gets a C on that and he moves on. But in the future, he might misidentify an opportunity or misidentify a threat. Are there black bears or are there grizzly bears? What are the threats in the area he's going camping? Building a fire, he's good at that. He's got an A, let's move on. Packing a canoe, he's got a D in that, but D is passing, right? So let's move on. But the canoe tipped over. The maps, GPS, matches, lost. That's the result. He wasn't quite ready for that part of it. Navigating on a map. B, let's move on. Would you trust someone out in the wilderness to lead you if they were 80% sure that they knew where they were going? Setting up a tent. Yep, he got that. Emergency decision making. Owen might struggle with that. And he got a failing grade, and he's unaware of his surroundings, but that's an F, and it all averages out to a C, so let's move on. You can see the message is we want to assess something and then move on. Now, I won't say that that's the case. I think that many of our educators do a great job of reteaching skills when students don't have them. But at some point in learning, it becomes final, and we do move on. So if we get more specific, if we get more clear on what it is that they don't understand, and we give them feedback that's on a learning continuum, students can help own that. So in this case, in a standards-based world, those same grades would translate to 1s and 3s, but the message isn't let's move on unless they've reached that proficiency. It's more practice and knowledge. It's relearning. It's Owen's going to come up with some scenarios for emergency decision making and research those so that he is ready for that camping trip. And he's not ready for the camping trip until he's got a 3 or more in each area. So when we compare those two, time is finite. And so ultimately, moving on is a thing. But if we know what Owen knows from one year to the next or what he doesn't know, then we're more ready to serve him at a much more surgical level than saying on a course level or in a grade level that we've moved on from a subject. We know more specifically what he knows, and more importantly, Owen knows what he knows and doesn't know, and so if that's important for him, he can have some ownership in that as well. But I'd ask you to compare, in those two different systems, which student is more ready for the camping trip? which version might be more ready for the camping trip. Overall, with standards-based learning, we're just striving to be more clear for the goals of each lesson, more clear and more specific feedback for students to own what they're learning, and more clear instructional strategies to better support and challenge all students. So how do we do this? Teachers in Jamestown have been working with the standards for a long time. Since standards came out, they're very knowledgeable about their standards. And the North Dakota State standards are how we decide what it is, what we teach. This is one of the reasons that as North Dakota comes out with new standards, that when we talked about the curriculum adoption process last year, we said that we're going to invest a significant amount of time into these standards. So as they come out from the state, we would like a 6-year curriculum cycle so that we're getting resources that support and teachers have time to work with a set of standards for a longer period of time. They're putting a lot of work in on the front end to build what are called proficiency scales, which basically is a map or a progression of learning for a specific standard. The target on these proficiency scales, the standard itself is always at the 3 level, and then we want opportunities to challenge students beyond that, and we want to build their foundational skills underneath that as well. So our goal is for students to take this set of priority standards that our teachers have worked hard to define. These are the most important non-negotiable standards for them to advance in this course or this grade level. And we want to be able to pull that apart into a learning progression. We also want to be able to diagnose, as the example said before, if you look at a vehicle inspection report and you know specifically what it is that needs to be done to your vehicle, it's much easier to make a decision. If we don't know, if it's more general and it's aggregated into a number, if not everybody knows, then we certainly can be more clear. As we look at another illustration here, so you can see the different pictures in there. Meeting the standard is the student successful at riding the bike independently. They need additional support and they need some basic skill instruction in the 1 and 2 level, but the standard is that they can ride that bike independently. So if we want all students to meet or master that standard, we have to provide the instruction in the lower areas, the 1s and 2s. But what do we do when a student comes to us and they can already ride a bike? How do we challenge that kid? And how do we know? We might know that from pre-assessment. We might know that in our classroom from a formative assessment or a check-in with that student. And so when we identify that, we're much better at responding to what that student needs, even if that means that we put that back on the student to learn a new stunt, to advance their own set of skills. If we know that we can do better. So how does it look different? We're collecting a body of evidence. So this body of evidence is based on the scales that our teachers have worked hard on to try to define that continuum of learning. So it's 1 through 4 grading rather than A through F. On the standards reports at elementary, now you'll see 1 through 4 grading instead of A through F. There's proficiency scales for every standard, and teams of teachers have worked to develop those, as well as the resources and assessments that go along with that. So proficiency scale, as you saw before in some simpler versions, just shows that the 3 level is proficient. So right in the middle there, you can see that's the standard. The 4 level is more complex and rigorous in the thinking, and the 2 level and 1 level just underpin that. So I'll just leave it briefly at that for now. Our results should be more specific as well, resulting in more actionable feedback, like the quarterback feedback or on the camping trip. We know specifically what it is that we still need to work on. And we have commitment to that if it's a priority standard. So teams of teachers, again, if I'm coming into PLC conversation. You guys have heard that term quite a bit, professional learning community. And we say, we just taught this standard and some of my students didn't get it yet. Now I know specifically, I can look back at that proficiency scale and we can try to figure out what exactly don't they get. And Rob's students did get it. So I can have a professional conversation with Rob. Hey, your students are getting the feedback. That's much easier than saying, my kid's got a 15 out of 20, and Rob, your average was 19 out of 20. How did you do that? It doesn't break it down enough for it to be actionable for us as educators. One of the things that we will roll out, and this is kind of a primer conversation. We'll have some educators that'll be able to come at future board meetings to talk about this as well. One of the platforms we're using in the district to try to communicate this is called Empower. And that platform helps us build a body of evidence over time. So we're working out some of the kinks within this. We're learning a lot about when dates that you put in and goal scores and things that, how that forms a body of evidence. But basically, we're tracking learning over time. And evidence comes in a lot of different forms. Evidence could be an informal conversation with Owen about learning those emergency skills for camping. Or it could be in a formal assessment of a quarterback's skills. So it ranges, evidence can range from everything from observational and classroom personal conversations with students all the way up to formal assessments. Our leads at the elementary level have worked really hard to build some common assessments, and they're doing things, some of them already, things like scoring camps, where they bring all the evidence together and they look at how their students did, and they look at to see, is this a valid measure of learning for this standard? Those are pretty powerful conversations about learning that weren't happening before all of this work that they've done. And as we look at building a body of evidence, doesn't that give you a lot more confidence and help students understand the growth mindset of how learning builds over time? So these are things that are outcomes of the work within SBL. So how does it benefit our kids? We want them, we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum for a reason. We know that these are the set of skills that are going to best prepare them for the future, whether that's the next grade level or the workplace. We know that we want to master those skills, and so they will be more prepared for the future if we have a system that gives them better feedback, and if we have a system that helps feed feedback to our teachers to make their lessons even better. Clarity, I think that's also a theme that hopefully you've seen. If we clearly communicate to a student that where they've mastered skills or where they need more support, we're going to be able to respond, and they're going to be able to have agency or ownership on what they know and what they still need to know. I believe that any kid can hit any target that they can see and that holds still for them, and we just need to help them see what those targets are. How does this benefit our teams? Again, that guaranteed and viable curriculum. We have really strong teams. They've worked a lot on defining what it is that we want kids to know and be able to do and building those assessments. And now they're working through that process of when a student hasn't learned it yet, what do we do? And when a student comes to us already knowing it, how do we help that student grow as well? One of the things that we're working on as a district is how do we get more surgical with our intervention? How do we get more surgical with our enrichment? And I believe that it starts at that standard level, and that's what the research would point to is a next step for us as well. So how do we make sure that we're supporting kids across the board, not on a categorical level, but on an individual level? Just working through this process has helped us to try to articulate scopes and sequences. So what you're looking at here is a screenshot from within our Empower system, and it's actually of our music priority standards. So the strands you can see going down the left: beat and rhythm, expressive elements, form, harmony, tonality, melody, music appreciation, performance, rhythm, and tonalities in there again. Those are strands of standards. And you can see across the K-5 curriculum, some of those standards are stepping stones for them to get to a different spot. Some of them are short-lived, and they're final after 4th grade, for example. So it's helped us to try to articulate a vision of how do these things progress across a K-5 curriculum, and we could look at examples from math and ELA as well. Ultimately, this is about getting more data-driven with our instruction, and so teachers are looking at that student data. They're looking at the assessments to see where students are at in their learning. Our professional learning communities have an opportunity to compare those results of those assessments, and it's really an opportunity for us to move towards that, build capacity for personalized learning. Not just another buzzword, but just how do we meet each individual student's needs? How do we ensure that every student walks away from our courses and grade levels with the skills they need, the priority skills that we've determined? And then how do we, as educators, get even more clear on what it is that we want for them, and eventually incorporating more individualized and authentic experiences into our learning. So it's a foundational thing. It started long before our phased implementation process with improvement priority from 2017 from our accreditation review to get more consistent with grading practices and standards. And we should be very proud of where we're at in a relatively short time with some pretty significant interruptions over the course of, COVID and new standard revisions and lots of different things that have interrupted the cadence of that. But our educators are committed to that work. They've been hard at work, and you can see that K through 5 started with implementation this fall. 6 through 8, according to this implementation process, ready to start next fall, and then 9 through 12, the fall of 2026. So a lot of problem solving to do in that time frame, a lot more learning and growth to be able to support at each level. And I think that the lessons we're learning as we're implementing at elementary will help strengthen rollouts at the next levels as well. We feel that this is going to be a foundational piece for growth for our district, and I hope that I've laid at least a little bit of a foundation. I know that Dr. Leck would like some more board education on this in the future, but I think I've gone over my time already. So, any questions at this point?
Any questions from the board? Oh, yep, Jamie. Yep, go ahead, Jamie.
It was a great presentation. Can you kind of explain how standard-based learning would correlate to grade point average at all, if it does?
Yes. So any of the high schools in North Dakota that are currently in standards-based learning and giving students feedback in that way have a conversion that they use, whether they convert back to a letter grade at the end of a semester. So it's standards-based feedback throughout the semester and then one final grade at the end of the semester. Or on the 4-point scale, they have a conversion back to a GPA. In terms of scholarships, and I could go back to state level conversations sitting around a table at the state in 2012 talking about standards-based learning at, they called it standards-based grading at that time at the state level, and people from higher ed were representatives, and there was somebody had asked a question, well, what will happen with students' transcripts when they come to a higher ed institution if it's not a traditional looking transcript? And they looked at us and they said, we take transcripts from around the world right now in 2012. We don't want to be the obstacle to you guys delivering students with more skills to us. So the transcript isn't the issue. Scholarships do require often a GPA, and so that's why schools are still producing a GPA.
Dan was next.
This was a great presentation. Thank you for explaining some of these things because it really clarified one of the questions that I've gotten from folks. And I can probably frame this in better as a comparison. So, for example, current system, grades A and B would be both meeting standard. The difference between a 3 and a 4, as it was described, was there's an additional skill. Currently, though, the difference between an A and a B grade is essentially the consistency of hitting that standard. How do you account for the consistency measurement within this framework?
So back to the body of evidence, I guess. So I'm going to explain this two different ways. As you're looking at this body of evidence, there are, and I wish I had zoomed in a little bit better, but there are 3 different mathematical models that are running here. One is an average, which is the horizontal line that you can see. One is called Marzano power law, and the other is a linear. And so the linear model is what it's saying is the most accurate in this case. So based on that body of evidence, the student's projection, or it's not a projection, it is the actual in this case, the model that's most accurate is the linear model that's showing that that's a 3, okay? So at the high school level, one of the models that we studied is called bimodal. And so the bimodal is looking at the 2 modes in a set of evidence. And the reason that the school that we talked to valued that bimodal is because it does give some weight to the previous parts of learning. This model does as well in a mathematical model, but bimodal does because what they found was, and this will surprise you, some students that knew if they only needed to do well in the test didn't work as hard on the practice as they maybe should have. Okay, so if they knew I could just do well on this one assessment and that most recent score was all that's important, that's why that high school has chosen to use a bimodal, so they're looking at the 2 highest modes to do that calculation. Yes. Yep.
Owen, yep.
It was interesting, the kind of phased rollout and the impacts at different levels. I'm curious, are there different anticipated kind of more challenging either grade levels or subject matter that to fit into these kind of standards?
Yes. The more complex your standards are, the more that they need to be broken down. We have some upper level classes that are AP, that are governed by, and dual credit that are governed by higher education. And so it becomes more complex, particularly with AP and dual credit. In terms of the phased rollout, is it any more complex? I think that it's easier to communicate if you're rolling this up with cohorts of students. This is more aggressive than that. So you can anticipate next year, our 5th graders who have some experience learning this way will come into 6th grade. But we'll also have 7th and 8th grade students that we have to have that conversation with them about what is learning and what's a grade, and also with those parents. So more challenging in terms of rollout to students that haven't experienced that. I think that our educators are up to the task. I also think that some of the upper grade levels, where you think about having a higher number of students, that we should have a conversation about how do we think about that number of students. Are there other models that are more amenable to having lower numbers of students at any given time so that you could give that better feedback. Let's not let the numbers part of that eliminate the opportunity to give better feedback. So I think that there are more discussions to be had in those cases with our upper level classes that are governed by external factors, and there's more conversations to be had in classes where there might be 150 students, just because that feedback, we'll have to work through how does that look. If it's 150 students to give feedback to, it's different than 15 to 20.
Jason?
Thank you. 10, 15 years down the road, I realize this has been a pretty heavy lift for staff involved, and the work is continuing. Is this being built in a way that is easily and efficiently updated as things at the state might change? Do you see it as an efficient use of staff time down the road?
One of the things that I'll go back to, when we looked at our curriculum adoption cycle, and I called the state before we built that because we wanted to try to project out, well, when are they going to rewrite the PE standards, for example? We want to make sure that we've got a year or two between when they rewrite the PE standards and when we want to adopt new resources. The reason it's on a 6-year cycle is that we'd like to say we can commit to the standards that we're working on right now for that full 6-year cycle. And if the state decides to change those standards in that time, we'll evaluate them, but we don't want to go through all of the work of rewriting our proficiency scales anytime that a national organization that influences the state to rewrite standards makes that shift. And so what I would say is we're committed to a set of standards for that 6-year cycle so that we can become better at that set of standards rather than trying to nimbly respond to which way the political wind blows.
Aaron?
So I sat in a review and presentation on this a couple years ago, and the presenter actually just gave a real simple description and characterization of the standards-based learning, and that was it's assessing objectively what the students learn, not the work that they do. So it's just because you do the work doesn't mean you necessarily understand the content and can actually execute to it, even if you do get a quote-unquote good grade. So that was just a simple characterization that I thought really stood out for me.
Thank you, Aaron. Anything else from the board? Jacob?
Yep, so looking back at kind of the camping analogy, when you have students that, maybe at the end of the semester, at the end of the year, aren't meeting a standard, what is the plan to assess those students or to work with those students? The power of this is we've developed ways to look at individual standards or skills that they need to master before they move on. What's the consequence of not mastering that? Thinking in our current grade-to-grade schedule, I don't think we want a bunch of kids retained in a individual grade because they couldn't master one skill. But if that's an important skill that's going to translate, to math at the high school level, if they aren't mastering that at the 3rd grade level, but they're continuing on each grade level from year to year, that's going to catch up to them eventually.
I'm going to go back to this slide here, and it's music, not math, but as a student progresses through this learning progression, you'll see a bar that comes across there, and I wish I had taken a screenshot specifically of that for a student. But this data stays with the student, so we know specifically what they know and don't know from one grade level to the next. Right now, we can do that through informal conversations, but we'll have sets of data that can be passed on for that. The other thing that I'd say is that as we're able to identify what kids know and don't know, we can more specifically target and surgically intervene. One of the challenges as a high school principal is looking at our math pathways and students that were coming in 3 and 4 years behind in the math pathway, and that's because they had been in interventions but never exposed to the rigor of grade level content. So the way that we're approaching even as early as this year at the elementary is our title specialists are pushing in and students are receiving support in the classroom on the standards that they need more help in, rather than categorically being moved to a separate class where they might still get what they're needing, but they also don't get the higher level standard. And so we're trying to close that gap more surgically than categorically. So over time, that does translate to students having higher sets of skills coming into high school. But there is that gap currently, and each year we get a little bit better, but there is that gap, currently and we don't have the information. We don't have the exact information on what skills to pass on from an 8th grade teacher to a 9th grade teacher. We will have that information when we're assessing by standards, at least better information to say this is what the student knew and was able to do the previous year, and so we can build on that. If you're asking about retention, like does a student stay in a certain grade level if they don't master a set of skills? I have a temporary solution at the high school level because that's one of the levels I've thought most about. What we currently do is if a student fails a course in either semester at the high school, typically in math, so sequential that if they fail the first semester course, the second one is going to be difficult, if not impossible.
Right.
I mean, kids can work hard, teachers work super hard every day to make that happen. But right now what they do is they may continue in that class and then they go to summer school, and the teachers do a great job in the math department of communicating, well, this is what they didn't master yet. They're actually in some ways able to track those standards currently, and then those students just have to repeat the part of the course in summer school that they're not repeating the entire course, they're just repeating the parts that they don't understand yet. So there are models where you can divide time differently at the high school or middle school level, where a student might complete a course in 2 trimesters, for example, and then the 3rd trimester, if they didn't master skills that are essential to move to the next level, then they'd be in that course to try to master those skills before moving on to the next grade level. It's all about how we divide time, but first we need the data.
Right.
First we need the information to more surgically say this is what a kid needs.
Okay. No, like I said, I think the value of this is identifying individual, needs for students. But then my question becomes, as that student moves on, is that the responsibility of the next teacher to identify each individual need for a student and then come with a curriculum that is dealing with all these different students with individual needs? Are we going to hire, specialists to sit in the classroom, in addition to the teacher? How is this going to affect our staffing needs in the future?
Yeah, those are all really good questions. I think that they're things that once we get the data, we're going to see more problems or more challenges, but it is really good to start to anticipate that and say, down the road, as we can identify what a kid needs, how do we respond to that? And what's reasonable to respond to? We have finite resources, but what can we do with the time and the data that we have to respond to their individual needs? Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. That was a very interesting presentation, and we look forward to hearing more in the future on this.
Thank you.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Lick.
Thank you. You do have my written report. Before I go into that, though, I just want to recognize we had our Cognia site review today. And I know members of the board and staff and administrators sat in on those different interviews and the final review. That will be, the results of that will be coming. They write a report for us and they score us in a lot of different areas, kind of similar to what Mr. Gaylor has just been talking about. They look at what we do holistically or where we are at. They score us and they'll write a great report for us. The feedback that we received was very good. I think that is indicative of the quality of staff, quality of our teachers and what they do every day, quality of our building administrators and how they support the work that happens in the classroom. And I think it's indicative of the work that the board has done to, laser focus really on what we're doing for strategic priorities. All of those are recognized in the hour-long report that they gave us at the end. Again, we'll have a lot more detail, but they gave us kind of some, a large overview, and they were very impressed with our district, as we hoped they would be. But just wanted to pass that along, and I know, Heidi, you were present as well. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, or Mr. Gaylor.
Yeah, it was a very good day. Our leadership team here at JPS did a tremendous job showcasing all of the work that our district has been doing, and they would not have been able to do that without all the work of everyone. Every single person in our district has put forth, and our leadership team was really able to demonstrate that today. So I'm very appreciative of all the work that everyone does in our district, because it really showed today. So thank you.
Okay, so as far as my superintendent's report, like I said, you have the written report. I'm going to spend the bulk of my time on the first item, which is parental leave policy revision. I know that I have a lot to share, and there will likely be some questions and discussions around what does this look like, what else, what other options may be considered, and I have a recommendation to make, and it's not something that I'm asking the board to act on today. I'm thinking in the future, but I just wanted to build some capacity in this meeting so we can have a rich dialogue and then move forward with a recommendation moving forward. But as the board's aware, in July of 2022, we adopted policy, it's DDAE, which provided parental leave for birthing parents, and then we provided 20 days, so the equivalent to 4 weeks that we have for paid leave for those staff that are birthing parents. So since the adoption of that leave, we have had, and really the problem that we were trying to solve at that time was we had a lot of sick leave, or a lot of unpaid leave that our birthing parents were taking. It was 36%. So in the 5-year look-back period that we did, 36% of the leave that staff were taking for maternity leave or birthing parent leave, 36% of that was unpaid, and it was escalating over time. We were getting closer to the FMLA 12 weeks, and that was, we were on that continuum, and that trajectory was people are taking more leave, even though it was unpaid. And so we looked at that and thought, we had a task force that met, and we looked and said, boy, I think we could probably do better and try to solve that problem. And so we came up with a place to start, which was 20 days, 20 paid days. And what we've seen since July of 2022 is that staff have been, number one, very appreciative for that leave. I've been told that more times than I can count, that people really think that's a very nice benefit, and they're very appreciative to have it. And our unpaid leave for maternity for birthing parents is almost nothing. We had a discussion where it might be 1 day, 1 day of leave, depending on when somebody's FMLA ended. I think it was maybe 1 unpaid day. So it really it solved that particular problem. But I also engaged with members of the staff who have used parental leave, and I wanted to ask them some questions about how's it going. Did it solve part of that? Did it solve problems for you? Were there other problems that existed from this that still haven't been addressed, or is there more that we can do? Do you like how this works? Is there something better that we can do? The feedback that I want to share, first of all, is this was my request for staff to come in. Staff have been nothing but appreciative of what's provided. They did not make a request to say, we want to talk about having more leave. That was never part of the conversation that we had. It was really just about getting down granularly to, what does this benefit provide, and does it do what it needs to do? Has it solved the problem in the short term, but also in the long term? And what needs to happen here? And I just wanted to understand the challenges for our birthing parents. And so I have a couple of takeaways and of things that I learned. They were so great, very gracious to give me their time, gave me great feedback, were very honest and upfront about what their experiences were. So I thought I learned a lot. One of the things that became kind of fairly obvious to me as we looked through and had these conversations, I started thinking about how things are different between birthing parents and non-birthing parents. I gave you an example. I won't go through the example. You can see that and read it. But, if you have a birthing parent and a non-birthing parent, really when you use sick leave to address maternity, there's potential for that to be an inequitable benefit because those teacher A and teacher B use that leave differently. If you include sick leave, or if you include maternity into sick leave, it almost does become it does become an inequitable benefit. I gave you an example between teacher A and teacher B over that 10-year span, and you're talking about beginning year 11, and this is just a straight apples to apples comparison, but 50 days different. That's a significant difference over a 10-year period of time when the only difference in this example, black and white example, is birth of 2 children. That's the only difference. And 50 days different, that becomes significant. So it made me think more and more about, do we do enough to address that particular gap? And that was the problem we were trying to solve with the leave task force, was to examine that particular issue. And so it did make me think, boy, there's really more that we can do, or maybe more that we should do. A few other things that were takeaways as I kind of thought about the feedback that I was getting is, we already cap our sick leave days. And you could almost consider, if we did something different here, that you aren't giving more, you're simply giving those days earlier, that eventually those days are going to be given back to you, because we don't compensate people for unpaid sick days. When they hit that cap, they just give them back. So eventually, in my assessment, very simple way to look at this is that they're already going to be returning those days, and of course the assumption is that they're still here by the time they get to that cap. But assuming they are, they're really giving those days back to us because we don't compensate them for those days anyway. I believe that we're going to continue to see an escalation of parental leave, getting even closer to that max of 12 weeks. That's the trend. That's the trajectory that we're seeing. I think you can anticipate seeing that even more. And one thing I really was, I don't know why I was surprised by this, but I was surprised by it, and I didn't like that staff were feeling this way. But I had a pretty direct feedback that we plan births around how many sick days we have in our bank. Not when it's right for my family, but when I have the appropriate number of days in my sick leave bank, so I don't have to take as much unpaid time, or so we can afford it. And I get it, we all make family decisions and they all have financial consequences, but I didn't like to hear that was a barrier to that, to growing our families and to the health and wellness of our families. I struggled with that. I shouldn't have been surprised by those comments, but I was. And the last thing, when our leave task force met, we were talking specifically about unpaid leave for birthing parents. And one of the things we didn't talk as much about, but there are a lot of other factors that come into this as well. If we can address birthing parent leave, we can address the birth of child. And if we can take that out of the equation, that gives us more time to be able to think about What happens maybe before pregnancy? Some of our families struggle with fertility. Those are sick leave days. And if we're spending sick leave days for those things on the front end, we don't have them available for those that are wanting to maximize that time outside of or after the birth. And so that what they desire to be 12 weeks maybe has to be 8 weeks. Or they can't take that unpaid time because they spent all of their leave on fertility treatments, maybe medically required bed rest, other health complications after pregnancy. There's a lot of different factors that come into play beyond simply the birth of a child. And so because of that, one of the other areas that I talked with this focus group about had to do with, well, what would the target be? And of course, we would all love to say, let's do it like we do in Europe, and you take a full year off. Everybody would love that. But of course, that's not realistic. But, we kind of centered on, at least the feedback that I got, based on that, I looked at 40 days. So our leave right now is 20. This would be doubling what we're providing right now. But that's 8 weeks. That gets you to, if you're, depending on what type of care you're needing, that might be your first medical appointment after. But that gets you 8 weeks on a 40-day. And I think that right now what we have is a wonderful benefit. I know the staff appreciates the benefit. They have told me multiple times in every different avenue that they appreciate the benefit. I think this goes further to solve the problem. Changes it from a nice benefit to much, much closer to solving the problem and creating greater staff equity in leave. And so my recommendation will be there. I know that there will be discussion about, what about non-birthing parent leave? And I think the board should have discussion about that. My recommendations don't include change there. That has not been the same, there has not been the same problem that we were trying to solve there. I think it would be a great benefit. I struggle with understanding how we might staff that if we had significant amount of leave there also, that we would have a harder time staffing that. But I understand the desire to want to. And I think if I told our staff that we were going to have leave for our non-birthing parents as well, they would think that's wonderful. They would definitely support that. But those are the reasons why my recommendation doesn't include that. Not that we don't want to do something, but I struggle with leave, and that has not been the same level of need represented from staff as well. But that is what I have included, linked is what would be the recommendation for policy DDAE and the administrative regulation. And again, that what I would ask to do is for consideration of that policy on December 16th, but for that not to go into effect until July 1st. We've already had we're in the middle of contract now. We've already had people that have accessed this leave. Treating different people differently in the same contracted year, I would feel uncomfortable with. So that would be my recommendation to start that on July 1st. But I would like to move forward with having greater conversation around what that policy should look like and questions on the recommendations that I have. So I'm just going to pause so that I think there'll be some conversation here.
Any questions? Owen?
I just want to express my appreciation for the heads up on this, I think, and the month-long heads up, because I think it's an important issue, and I think it's one that is an important benefit to consider expanding. And I was thinking about how we're focusing on the problem we're trying to solve at hand. And I think if we're thinking about this problem of leave deficits and allowing for adequate recovery time related to birth events, I'd like to request and propose that you and the rest of the board consider expanding the policy to both birthing and non-birthing parents. I think this would allow the same benefit to the non-birthing parents to not build that leave deficit. I think it's in line with FMLA, where both parents are afforded the same protections. Also, having the benefit available to the non-birthing parents would allow for the partner to move into a primary care role if needed in the instance of common C-section recoveries and postpartum mental health issues that may arise. So this also it opens the door to expanding the leave benefit to adoption, which is also in line with benefits afforded to federal employees and also in other states that are actually more expansive, covering 12 weeks of paid parental leave that can be taken within a year of the qualifying event. So, thanks.
Any other comments from the board? Questions? Aaron?
Yeah, I'd support the recommendation as put forth, and I think anything beyond that should definitely have some further discussion, so.
If I may, we had in the leave task force, and just for the sake of clarity, and I know, Owen, you referenced this, I just want to make sure that everybody connects. Originally, when our leave task force discussed, we were fairly strong in wanting to include adoption in our initial policy. What we found on legal review, though, is that to include, we are able, through FMLA to treat birthing parents differently because of the medical need. So there's an exception, basically, that allows that need to be different. Adoption and non-birthing parents have to be treated the same. And what we had initially wanted to do was bring forward a policy that said adoption is treated the same as a birthing parent. You're unable to do that. The only way you can do that is by expanding, and I just want to clarify Owen's point, that you can't do that for adoption without doing it for non-birthing parents as well. And so that was the challenge that we brought forward as a recommendation. It's still a challenge. I'm an adoptive dad. I want adoption leave for our families because I would have wanted it too. My struggle, continues to be, how do we staff that if we have, even more people leaving? We struggle with substitute teachers now, and that shouldn't be the only reason we don't do something, but it is a barrier that we need to really think about what the impact would be, and just the impact right now of the interest. Interest isn't the right word, but the application of our non-birthing parent leave right now. Our families don't take a significant amount of that now. We have access of up to 15 days. Some do take 15 days. Most take between 0 and 5. That's what the impact is now with access to sick leave. I completely understand the point. Conceptually, I agree with both of those points. In practice, I'm struggling a little bit with how we would do it, but I think it, of course, merits a lot of discussion. But that's, where what I'm recommending for the 16th of December is what I've done here, which is the increasing from 20 to 40. But if we want to have a greater conversation prior to that time, I just need some direction by the board. Otherwise, I would just bring this forward and you can have discussion on the 16th. But I think that, both points merit a lot of further discussion. Retreat, I think we want to data gather a little bit, before we made such a change, but I think there's really good intent behind all of this discussion.
Yeah, we could move it to as a retreat topic as well, which is only a couple more weeks past the 16th. Jason?
Real quick, the way presented, is this, and comparable to other districts, is this an aggressive policy already?
20 is already aggressive. A handful of districts after we adopted this as well. Grand Forks actually adopted, it happened through negotiations. I'm not sure which side brought it forward, but they actually adopted a policy similar to what Owen is talking about, or that's in their negotiated agreement now, where I believe that there's benefit for birthing and non-birthing. But I don't know how many days it is, but I know that that's in their negotiated agreement now. But this is very, very aggressive. I think we have been too long to address this particular issue. And I'm glad that we are, on the aggressive end, because I think we can, like I said, just trying to solve the problem and not just having a real nice benefit.
Jacob?
Yeah, I would say I am surprised that non-birthing parents aren't taking the leave that's available to them. So just in preparation for future discussions, I don't know if it's possible for you to, talk to some of the same folks and determine why they made those specific reasons or why they made those choices specifically.
It's actually a great idea. I could do something very similar to what I did with our birthing parents, just bring a couple of non-birthing parents, those that took or didn't take the leave, and just talk to them about why. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? What's our thought on moving this to our board retreat versus the 16th, or just bring it forth on the 16th? And then we can still have discussion. Doesn't preclude us from having discussion at the retreat also, as we gather more information and more data. Thoughts from the board? Whatever you'd like to do. Yes, Aaron?
Yeah, I'd like to see just move forward with the recommendation on the 16th, and then future state, if we want to carry the conversation further, then do so at that time.
All right, we'll go with that plan unless anyone has any other objections to that. Okay. All right, moving on in your report.
Okay, activities, transportation. Dan covered this already. I just have a little more detail for the board. I'd certainly stand for questions at the end if you have any. I've talked about district committee charters, that we're working on that. Hopefully by the end of January, we'll have all of our district charters represented there, or our district committees represented in charters. I wanted to share something that I was having a conversation with the food service about. They were struggling with how to adapt to needs, dietary needs. Basically, we've had an influx, a great amount of diversity in our community. And, I had a wonderful conversation with Cindy around how can we best address those dietary needs that come from cultures, the cultural influx into Jamestown, and how can we leverage those new cultures into our menus for food. And so she had a great idea. We kind of collaboratively came up with an idea of bringing some families in that are new to our community, those that have dietary restrictions, and those that have different menus at home, and how can we adapt those menus at a food service level. Like Cindy says, I can make anything, fit into the requirements for our menu. We have pretty stringent requirements, the federal food service. But she said, I can make pretty much anything work. And so she wanted to not only talk about the dietary restrictions so people understand what we're doing and how all of this fits together, but also how can she take some really great menu items that they are making at home and try to adapt them for all kids and the food service level. One example that came up as we were talking that I think is relevant, we have some families and students that can't eat pork, as an example, but don't realize that some of the bacon we have is turkey bacon. So just a little tiny bits of awareness that can help us understand. So when they come to the menu and it says bacon, they know they can't have bacon, but they can have turkey bacon. So it's just those little things that we're seeing that are coming up. And so I think that's something really neat that Cindy Wall is looking to do for food service, and I just wanted to share that. Child care updates, I've given you kind of an example of the types of things that group is already working pretty hard. They're going to continue. They have lots of items to check off their list. Everything is still trending towards opening at the beginning of the next school year. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then, and that group is working pretty hard. I had a great opportunity to talk to the Rotary Club. I was talking about our community committee on facilities, all of the things that this board and the district has done with targeting what our facility needs are. I thought that was great. I know, we had 25 people there. The feedback we got was great, so I was glad to start those conversations. So if any community group or other entity would like me to come and share about what's happening with that community committee, I am happy to come to anybody and talk about what it is that we're doing, what we're talking about. And I think we're to the place where we're ready. We're at a point where we can have those conversations with the community. So hit me up if you are interested. One other area with facility planning discussions that I think is really important as we get closer to the plan, we've had discussions about operational changes that are going to need to happen. So as we get closer to that, I think it's important. I've completed a survey that we can share to staff. The staff that are impacted with the closure of a building, potential closure for a building, operational changes from 8 sections to 7 sections. We need to get feedback from them. And so I created a survey that I'll be sending out to staff in the near future that says, if something were to change, what is your preference? Is it, I really want to be at a certain building, or I really want to be in a certain grade level, or these are the grade levels that I have preferences in or feel most comfortable with. We need to gather that feedback so when we make staffing decisions, we can do it purposefully and not just plugging and playing and saying, take teacher A and put them into this current vacancy. We want to be able to look at every position that we have and allow staff to prioritize. Because to some person, for example, teaching first grade might be their biggest priority. To another person, it's working in one of 2 schools might be the biggest priority that they have. For another person, I would really love to be in an instructional coach role. We have a vacancy there. Well, that's going to help us make decisions and not just put people somewhere, but put them in the right place and give them the right position moving forward. So that's something that we're looking to do in the near future. The last thing I have before I stand for questions is just the spotlight. And I want to read it just verbatim. I know you can see it and you can read it, but I want to, just for the public, I want to read Jamestown Public Schools proudly recognizes Kim Carpenter for her impactful contributions to education at the school district and state levels. Kim's leadership in revising state standards, advocating for and piloting updated assessment tools like NAVI and NDA+, and serving on our district school improvement committee, JHS site-based leadership team, exemplify her dedication to student success. Known statewide for her expertise in mathematics education, Kim is a respected and tireless advocate for high-quality learning experiences for all students. And we are grateful for her commitment and the excellence she brings to our schools every day. So Kim is my spotlight for this meeting. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the remainder of the report? Owen.
I have one. So I appreciate the update to the Rotary Club, and I'm curious if there are plans to give similar updates directly to the parents and the communities, especially starting with Washington and Lincoln. I'm already kind of hearing some communication issues from parents at Washington saying they'd like to be directly informed of some of these things.
Sure, and that's reasonable. As we looked at this year, I think it's important that we get the committee task force, the community committee on facilities. That group is going to look at those 4 options and provide feedback. I think it's really important that we let that group continue or complete its work, and then we hit right on to how we're communicating those next steps. So that's anticipated to be completed in December. So I think as soon as that work is complete and that recommendation is made, then we start having those conversations. But I agree completely that getting that information in front of parents and our staff is crucial. Yeah, and our next meeting is tomorrow.
Jacob.
Yep, similar question just about communication with the survey to teachers. I did have an elementary teacher that I ran into over the weekend that saw this in the agenda and was a little freaked out, that maybe just giving them a heads up about what the purpose of the survey was they were just kind of like, oh, I'm getting a survey about not having a job in the future,
Yeah.
is kind of
Sure.
that was their perspective, and I don't think it was fair. I didn't have all the details, but
Yeah.
maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, I do a superintendent's address that is generally about an hour. This year, it was a smidge longer, at 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes. But the reason it was longer is because we wanted to, I went through all of the changes in the strategic plan, which were really important. We want to make sure that everybody understands those. But the bulk of that additional time was spent around what the district has done and all of the factors. One of the slides that I reinforced a couple of times, attrition. We can deal with any changes through attrition. That has been the mantra we've talked about. Absolutely, there is no doubt in my mind with good planning, and this is what I said at that meeting back in August, with good planning we can make these changes. I don't believe that anybody should be surprised that we're having these conversations at the staff level. We were pretty direct about what was, what we were looking at and the challenges that we were seeing. We talked about the 4 options and which of those options are do we believe are reasonable, and what can we do? That the status quo isn't an option that we can continue. So I think we heard that pretty clear, but there's always going to be questions. And when you're talking about big changes, there's always going to be concern and question. And even when I heard it, but is that what's really going to happen? And so that's why I think it's important that, to Owen's point and to others, that we have those communications as soon as possible. Because there are questions. What does that mean? We've had this conversation before, and nothing's ever happened with it. So is it real? Is it real this time? And so, yes, I think we need to get to that place of, but absolutely, with good planning, we should need to only focus on attrition. I do not envision any non-renewals or any people that are losing their jobs. As I said to the staff in August, we can't fill all of our positions now. I don't think attrition is going to be a problem.
And I'd just like to reiterate that as well. We have openings right now that we can't fill, and I think we've made attempts to be very transparent about our process and including stakeholders and continue to include stakeholders, and there's going to be a lot more conversations at hand. So go ahead, Owen.
Yeah, I just had one more thing about the community committee coming up. I don't know if this is in consideration or if there's been discussion about dedicated either social media space or website space just to keep updates in a central location. I think we heard at the new staff training, we were at the school board association meeting, the person that was leading one session had cited Oaks as having a referendum recently that had really good social media presence and really good transparency and communication just to reach people kind of where they are.
Yeah, that's good feedback. I'm going to have a conversation with ICON when they're here supporting those pre-referendum services on how we should be moving forward with that. I think it's a good idea.
Any other comments from the board or questions? Okay, excellent. With that, we're going to move on in our agenda. We have nothing under old business. Under new business, nothing under activities. Under buildings and grounds, we have A, approval of AIA agreement with ICON. Is there a motion? Motion by Jason? Yep. Okay. Second by Aaron. We have a motion, a second for approval of AIA agreement with ICON. Any discussion?
Just had a comment. There was a request to look at some changes to Section 3 on risk mitigation. And I've provided some feedback from them. If we make a revision, I'll just bring in a revised agreement for the board to consider, but that would be the change.
Okay. Any questions about that? So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 3, curriculum assessment and instruction. A, approval of JHS course addition requests. Number 1, anthropology, and number 2, introduction to exceptional children. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? Second by Steve. We have a motion, a second for approval of JHS course addition request, Anthropology and Introduction to Exceptional Children. Any discussion? Aaron?
Yeah, so the anthropology curriculum there, I think, might be in conflict with our policy GBAA. And looking at the objectives in that, it's very specific on a specific worldview that does rely on a belief system and a faith, and which, again, so with that, it's basically a secular religion that's being advocated within that curriculum. And so I believe it violates the GBAA policy. So without having some level of a balance within that, as opposed, and not an advocacy for a certain worldview, I think it shouldn't fit into our curriculum.
Yep, Jason, go ahead. I was just pulling this up on my agenda.
I had the same thoughts when I read the anthropology description, and right away, just more clarification perhaps. And then my question would be, is that in line with most other such courses offered, in public high schools? But I did have the same concern as Mr. Roberts.
Do we want to look into it and bring it back? So-
I was just thinking we could
Yeah.
have a greater conversation with the writer, look at policy and just table this for now, and have greater conversation around and answer some questions if board members have before we move forward.
Okay. Okay. So there's, okay, so we have a motion to approval of JHS course addition request number 2, Introduction to Exceptional Children, and a second. Any discussion on that? Any discussion? Okay, now help, I always get, which one are we voting on first? Your motion. Okay, so we're going to vote on, so a yes means, or an aye means you're approving the Introduction to Exceptional Children only. Any other discussion at this time? Is that correct? So,
You have to vote on to amend the motion.
to amend the motion, okay, so yeah, we're.
Only be acting on
On,
one today.
okay, so, yeah.
That's what your motion is.
Yep, so we're only acting on the one today. So any other discussion on that? Is that correct?
That's what you're voting on.
Yep.
So you have to have two motions, two votes.
So, okay, so we're going to vote first to amend it
Yes.
and then amend it with,
Then vote on the amended motion.
okay, see, I always miss that. Thank you for the help on that, I appreciate that. So is there, we have a motion, a second for an amendment. Aye means you're in favor of an amendment. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, that part approved. Now we have to vote on the actual amendment, correct?
Yes.
So now,
Amended motion, yeah.
now you're voting on the amended motion, just including number 2, 3A number 2, Introduction to Exceptional Children. Any discussion on that? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That is approved, and we will get more information on number 1 and bring that back at a later date. So thank you for that. Number 4, finance. So there's just some informational for the general fund balance and the monthly financial reports. Any questions for Christy on those at this time? Did you review them? Okay. All right. If not, moving under operations. So we have been talking about the school board retreat, and so January 6th has been the date at 5:30 at JVCTC Center. Is that a date that is going to work for everyone? Okay, all right.
I believe there was a conflict potential that would arise during that date, then I would suggest to move it to the following week, the 13th.
Or the 13th, everyone can check their schedules. Good, 13th? Owen, 13th, okay, you're?
No, I have a conflict.
Okay, okay. Do we want to send out a doodle for other dates? How would, so we have this on our agenda today, but how would the board feel about just sending out a doodle with some other dates and just seeing if we can find a date that
Yep.
works for everybody? Does that work? And
And we
then,
can, I'll just put it on the December 16th agenda.
Okay.
And we'll just finalize the date.
well, and even if we find a date that everyone's available for, we can let everybody know so they can put it on their schedule. And so for new board members, typically our retreats include, and I think you did attend the one prior, but it's a several-hour event, so you can plan your schedule accordingly. And some food. We have food, so, okay. Okay, if everyone's okay with that, then moving on. Number 6, personnel. A, approval of JPS childcare program job descriptions. So we have number 1, FACS teacher childcare supervisor. Number 2, FACS teacher center coordinator. And number 3, childcare worker. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron, is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second to approve 1 through 3. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, resignation of Larry Eslicht. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. A second by Jason. We have a motion, a second for resignation of Larry Eslicht. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Policy and procedures. Approval of amended policies and regulations. Would we like to do these together? Okay. Number 1, HEAC, Management of Student Activities Funds. Number 2, HBAA, Federal Fiscal Compliance. Number 3, HBAA-AR1, Federal Fund Expenditures and Inventory Requirements, with subsequent rescind HBAA-E, Title I Fiscal and Inventory Requirements. Number 4, HBAA-AR2, District Personnel Time and Effort. Number 5, HBAA-E, District Personnel Time and Effort Form. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? Second by Owen. We have a motion and a second to approve under policies and procedures, amended policies and regulations 1 through 5. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under tuition or other. Meetings to be scheduled. We have the Community Facilities Committee meeting on Tuesday, November 19th at 5 p.m. in the multipurpose room at the middle school. District Improvement Committee meeting on Thursday, December 5th at 3:30 p.m. in the Media Center at the high school. Mr. Gaylor's not giving us a break. We're going right into the next review. Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, December 9th, 2024 at 3:45 p.m. in the District Office Conference Room. And our regular school board meeting on Monday, December 16th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. Any other meetings that were missed? Yes, Jason.
Just for clarification, the Facilities Committee meeting, that's not this room, correct?
Okay.
It says multi-purpose room?
Yes, multi-purpose room.
That's the one,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, the multi-purpose room is kind of the back entrance by the gym. There's a
Okay.
a room
I just
right
wanted
next
to
it.
clarify that that was correct.
Is that correct?
We're going to do that in Thompson.
We're going to do that in Thompson? Okay,
The meeting tomorrow? Yeah. It should be in Thompson.
okay.
Sorry.
That is where the multipurpose room is. However, the meeting is in Thompson. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thought you were asking location of it, so, yeah. Okay.
We might have a conflict in the room, but I thought we were good here. But
Okay.
We'll double check, we'll give you some.
Well, thank you for noticing that, Jason. Anything else any other committee meetings that we didn't notice? Okay, all right. With that, monthly superintendent evaluation, section 2, board relation, and section 5, community relations. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.